Hey, what's up, guys? This is Benny Ricciardi with rotocurve.com, and I'm here with some DraftKings quarterback plays for week 3 of NFL DFS. There's a lot of guys that I've been looking at today, and it seems to me like a lot of the cheaper options make a lot more sense for us to use this week. There's a couple guys I'm going to talk about on the cheap end, but before I get there, the one expensive guy who I do think is in play this week, and I probably have some in my rosters, is going to be Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers faces the Kansas City Chiefs this week. He's at home in a game with a 48 total on Monday Night Football. He has a banged-up Eddie Lacy that's going to be running out there for him. The Chiefs, basically the Packers' defense has been pretty good against the run this year. And I think that this game is going to turn into a little bit of a shootout on both sides, where both quarterbacks are going to be throwing a lot of passes. When that does happen, it usually means that we get a couple more plays for each team to run and a few more points that are going to be scored. Now, with no Lacy, again, Lacy may still actually play. I don't want to say no Lacy right now. He got banged up last game. Stark wound up finishing the game for him. But it's looking right now like even if he does play, he's not going to be 100%. So I think that Green Bay is going to have to lean a little bit more on the passing game than they normally do. Rodgers hasn't had any big yardage games so far yet this season, but he has wound up throwing a whole bunch of touchdowns in a couple games that they have had. I think that with this game being on Monday night, there's going to be a big crowd for it. There's going to be a lot of people pumped up. He's going to be at home in Green Bay, and I think that they're going to be throwing the ball a lot, as well as Kansas City, who's also going to be throwing the ball, which means that we're going to see a lot of points here. Rodgers is a little bit expensive. He's $8,000. I think he might actually be the most expensive quarterback on the market for DraftKings this week. And it's very tough to stack Aaron Rodgers because you don't really know which way to go with it. The thing that I do like is he has a lot of cheap wide receivers that you can put in there. Obviously, Randall Cobb is the expensive one, but you could stack him up with guys like Richard Rodgers, who's only $2,500 minimum price at tight end. You could stack him up with a guy like James Jones, who seems to catch touchdown passes every week, or even a Devontae Adams if you wanted to look that way. I think Jones is the one who's probably taking it's probably going to be the highest owned of them all because he's basically just catching touchdown passes every game right now. But I do think Aaron Rodgers could have a big game here. He's going to need to put up a big score for you in order for you to really have a huge day out of him in tournaments. But I do think that for a cash game quarterback, if you're looking for a safe 20 points, I think Aaron Rodgers is definitely one of the guys that can get you a safe 20 to 25 points this week. The guy who I like the most this week is actually Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton goes up against a Ravens team that just finished giving up 350 yards and 3 touchdowns to Derek Carr of the Oakland Raiders. So far this season, Andy Dalton has thrown 5 touchdowns with no interceptions, which is a very good ratio. The over-under in this game is only 44, but the Ravens are favored by 2.5 at home. That means to me that there's a good chance that since he could be trailing in this game, which would mean that there's a very good chance that Dalton's going to have to be throwing. Now, Dalton has some really good weapons out there. Especially if Gio Bernard's going to be getting a little bit of a bigger workload after the fumbleitis that Jeremy Hill had last game. But you're talking about a wide receiver core that includes guys like Marvin Jones, guys like Mohamed Sanu, obviously A.J. Green, and even Tyler Eifert, who is really coming to his own as a big-time tight end receiving option for Dalton there as well. So Dalton has a lot of weapons that he can spread the ball around to. This Ravens defense has been, basically lit up with the pass so far this year. They did a pretty good job against Peyton Manning in the opener, but as we've seen, Peyton Manning is not who we expected Peyton Manning to be. He's definitely not playing at 100%. So I think I would tick that down a little. Giving up 350 yards and 3 touchdowns, though, to David Carr is definitely not something that I would have expected to see out of this Ravens team. They're still very stout against the run, so I don't know if Cincinnati is going to have an easy time running the ball against them, which kind of leads me to believe that they're going to have to rely on the pass in this game. And if that's the case, you can get Andy Dalton at a pretty cheap price of only $5,700, and I think that he would make for a very good GPP play this weekend. Another guy I want to talk about is a little bit of a homer pick. As you guys know, I'm a big Jets fan, but the Jets are playing Philly this weekend, so I think that Ryan Fitzpatrick could be somebody who's in play. Quarterbacks tend to do pretty well against Philly because they wind up having to throw the ball, and I also really like taking quarterbacks who are underdogs at home. I don't understand how right now after watching Philly play, but apparently Philly is favored by 2.5 points over the Jets so far on the opening line. Let's see. Philly plays at a high pace. This is a high score game. The total is somewhere up around 47. And again, like I said, the Jets are a home dog here. So I do think that Fitzpatrick is going to have to be throwing late. Another thing that I really like about this game is Kiko Alonso just got hurt, meaning that Philly just lost their nickel linebacker, who they usually have out on the field. They play nickel in about 50 to 60% of their overall packages. So Kiko Alonso, even though he's not considered a quote-unquote starting linebacker, is actually on the field as much, if not more, than guys like D'Amico Ryans. Let's see. As an underdog, I think both of these run defenses are pretty good, so I think we're going to see a lot of passing on both sides of this game. And I think that Fitz at 5,100 is somebody who can get you a nice return. Now, he's put up basically a couple touchdowns, 2 touchdowns, and around 200 yards so far in each of the first 2 games. Not really huge totals, but again, this is a game that's going to have a higher total and a higher pace, so you would expect a little bit of an uptick in his numbers. If he can get you 250 and 3 touchdowns here and wind up with 20, 21 points, that's going to be 4 points for every $1,000 of cost and would put you on pace to have a tournament-winning type roster with him on top of it. Another guy who I really like here today is going to be Marcus Mariota for some pretty similar reasons. He's an underdog at home in a game with a 48 total. Indy has allowed good games already to quarterbacks like Tyrod Taylor and Ryan Fitzpatrick. So I think that we could see something pretty big here out of Mariota. I don't really love the run game that they have in Tennessee right now. I know everybody loved Bishop Sankey after the first week, but basically the game that they had last week, they had Bishop Sankey in there. They had Terrence West in there. They even had, what's his name, McCluster, I think. They had like 3 running backs who they were rolling on through. And none of them really did all that great of a job in that game. So I think if they're going to keep up with a high-scoring game here, they're going to have to rely on the pass, which is going to make Mariota an option that you want to consider. He's only 6,100, so he's not incredibly cheap, but he's also not expensive at all either. And I think he could pay that off if he winds up throwing 2 touchdowns and getting you close to, maybe 200 yards passing or 250 yards passing and 30 or 40 yards rushing, which is not out of the question for a guy like him. The last guy I want to talk about here is going to be Nick Foles. Nick Foles is in a home matchup with Pittsburgh, and it's a 48 total in that game with St. Louis being favored. Pittsburgh has allowed 311 yards passing so far on average this season. Now, again, that number is a little bit skewed because they did play that first game against New England, who's a big passing team. But I still think that, this is a team that you can pass on. Their rush defense is okay, and I also think that the St. Louis rush defense is very good, meaning that both sides of this game are going to see a lot of passes. And when you have passes on both sides of the game, that usually means that you're going to see a higher score and a little bit more plays being run, just like the situation that we spoke about before. When you have more plays being run and a higher score, you're usually going to get better stat lines out of the quarterbacks. And that's why I think Nick Foles could be another option that you can consider here. He's only 5,200, and I understand nobody really likes any of his weapons. It's not like he has a lot of guys out there who you want to put into your roster or really stack them up with. But again, he's a guy who I think should be in a really good spot today and could give you some really nice value at only 5,200. Remember, at 5,200, if he throws 2 touchdowns and throws for 200 yards, he's going to return at least 3 points per $1,000 of cost for you. If this does turn into a big shootout with a 48 total and a guy like Nick Foles winds up with 3 touchdowns and 300 yards, he's going to wind up returning somewhere around 25 to 27 points for you. And for a guy that you can get at only 5,200, that's going to be basically great value for you in your rosters this week. So those are some of the guys who I have my eye on. I know people are going to be pretty heavy on, a guy like Ben Roethlisberger this week or guys like Sam Bradford. But I got to be perfectly honest. I mean, I haven't seen anything out of these guys that makes me really want to put them onto any of my rosters. I wouldn't use them in cash. I obviously think that they're both guys who could be bullets for you in a tournament if you're trying to win a large prize pool GPP. They both have the ability to throw for a lot of yards. I just don't think that this is going to be the week for it. With D'Angelo Williams running well and Le'Veon Bell coming back, I do think that the St. Louis defense has been a lot easier to run on than pass on so far this year. So I think that Pittsburgh is going to keep it on the ground and, basically try to go after him that way. So that wraps it up for some of our picks for this week for quarterbacks for DraftKings, NFL DFS. Thank you for joining us here at RotoCurve. And as always, stay classy, DFS.